The Nile Valley, Chapter 5, Lesson 1. A fertile valley. Between 6000 BC and 5000 BC, hunter-gatherers moved into the green Nile River Valley from less fertile areas of Africa and Southwest Asia. They farmed the land and built several dozen villages along the riverbanks. These people became the earliest Egyptians. The River of Life. Although Egypt was warm and sunny, the land received little rainfall. For water, the Egyptians had to rely on the Nile River. They drank from it, bathed in it, and used it for farming, cooking, and cleaning. The river provided fish and supported plants and animals. To the Egyptians, then, the Nile was a gift. They praised it in a song. "Hail, O Nile, who comes from the earth, who comes to give life to the people of Egypt." Even today, the Nile inspires awe. It is the world's longest river, flowing north from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. This is a distance of some 4,000 miles. Traveling the length of the Nile would be like going from Atlanta, Georgia, to San Francisco, California, and then back again. Two separate rivers. The Nile begins as two separate rivers. One river, known as the Blue Nile, has its source in the mountains of eastern Africa. The other, known as the White Nile, starts in marshes in Central Africa near Lake Albert. The two rivers meet and form the Nile just south of present-day Egypt. Their narrow cliffs and boulders in the Nile form these wild rapids called cataracts. Because of the cataracts, large ships can use the Nile only for its last 650 miles. It would be too dangerous for a ship to cross through where there's boulders and cataracts. Natural barriers. In Egypt, the Nile runs through a narrow green valley with deserts on either side. As you can see on the map, the Nile looks like a long stem of a flower. Shortly before the Nile reaches the Mediterranean Sea, it divides into different branches that look like the flower's blossom. These branches fan out over a delta. A delta is an area of fertile soil at the mouth of a river. The Redlands. To the west of the Nile Valley is a desert called the Western Desert. The Western Desert forms part of the Sahara, which is the world's largest desert. To the east, stretching to the Red Sea, is the Eastern Desert. In some places, the change from green land to barren sand is so sudden that a person can stand with 1 foot in each. The ancient Egyptians called the deserts the Redlands because of their burning heat. Although these areas could not support farming or human life, they often kept outside armies away from Egypt's territory. Other geographic features also protected the Egyptians. The Nile's dangerous cataracts blocked enemy boats, and the delta marshes offered no harbors for invaders. The Egyptians were definitely luckier than the people of Mesopotamia. In that region, few natural barriers protected the cities. The Mesopotamians constantly had to fight off attackers, but Egypt rarely faced threats. As a result, Egyptian civilization was able to grow and prosper. Travel by water. Despite their isolation, the Egyptians were not completely closed to the outside world. The Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea gave the Egyptians a way to trade with people who lived outside of Egypt. Within Egypt, people used the Nile for trade and transportation. Winds from the north pushed their sailboats down south. The flow of the Nile would carry them up north. Egyptian villages thus had frequent, friendly contact with one another. This helped the ancient Egyptian kingdoms develop a sense of unity or togetherness. The river floods. Like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians also had to cope with river floods. However, the Nile floods were much more dependable and gentle than those of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. The Egyptians did not worry that sudden heavy overflows would destroy their homes and crops, or that too little flooding would leave their fields parched. Instead, every spring, heavy rains from Central Africa and melting snows from the highlands of East Africa added to the waters of the Nile as it flowed north. From July to October, the Nile flooded. Success in farming. The Egyptians took advantage of the Nile's floods to become successful farmers. They planted wheat, barley, and flax seeds in the rich, wet soil. One reason the ancient Egyptians were successful farmers was their ability to develop the technology and methods that allowed them to make the most of the Nile as a source of water for their fields. The key to their success was their wise use of irrigation. Egyptian farmers first dug basins or bowl-shaped holes to trap the floodwaters. Then they dug canals, or like a ditch, to carry water from the basins to fields beyond the river's reach. The Egyptians also built dikes, or earthen banks, to strengthen the basin walls. In time, Egyptian farmers developed other methods to help them in their work. For example, they used a shadoof, a bucket attached to a long pole to lift water from the Nile to the basins. Early Egyptians also developed geometry, a type of mathematics, to survey or measure the land. When floods washed away boundary markers between fields, they'd survey the fields to just reset the boundary markers. A system of writing. Papyrus, a reed plant that grew along the shores of the Nile, became a useful resource. At first, the Egyptians gathered papyrus to make baskets, sandals, and river rafts. Later, they used papyrus for paper making. The first step was to cut the stalks of the plant into narrow strips. Then, the Egyptians soaked the strips and pounded them flat. Left in the air to dry, the strips became stiff. They could then be joined to form a roll of paper. Hieroglyphics. The Egyptians used their papyrus rolls as writing papers. Like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians developed their own system of writing called hieroglyphics. It was made up of hundreds of picture symbols. Some symbols stood for objects and ideas. Other symbols stood for sounds, just as the letters of our alphabet do. Scribes painstakingly carved hieroglyphics onto stone walls and monuments. For everyday purposes, scribes invented a simpler script and wrote on papyrus. In ancient Egypt, few people could read and write. Some Egyptian men, however, went to special schools to study reading and writing and to learn to become scribes.